Welcome to another episode of Mind Over Matter, where today's conversation invites us to explore life not as a series of random disruptions, but as a powerful unfolding of inner evolution. With us is Dr. Jessie, remarkable guides who turned the season of unraveling into a pathway of rebirth. Her work, rooted in psycho-spiritual insight and lived experience, reminds us that transitions are not detours but thresholds. Welcome to the show, Dr. Jessie. It's such an honor to have you.
Same. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited about this conversation.
hmm So many people fear transitions because they feel like losing control. In your experience, what's the most misunderstood aspect of stepping into a major life shift?
That's a great question. The most misunderstood, it's hard to say that there's just one, right? There are so many things that individuals go through that are difficult, and people experience those things in different, you know, in a variety of ways, right? I think, like you mentioned in the introduction, my lived experiences with this whole process is that, for example, when my kids grew up, I have 3 children. They, most people go through that empty nest, syndrome. And I didn't at first. I was super excited that they moved out. I was finally free. I don't have to, I can uh, come out of the shower in the nude and not have to worry about, wrapping myself up or, just things that I was more comfortable just to be, right? With your kids at home, you're still comfortable, but you can't do certain things, right? So I was super excited about it. But then what happened is I realized because they were forging their own lives, they were not as needy. They weren't reaching out to me. They weren't calling me. And so I shifted from feeling like I had purpose because I was so present in their life to all of a sudden feeling like I don't have any purpose anymore. Like they don't need me. And that was a huge eye-opening experience for me because I felt this sense of loneliness. I felt disparaged. I felt and emptiness because they had always been around and they always needed me and I was always there to provide for them. I was that person that was there to nurture them. And so for me, it was a sense of trying to understand where this feeling was coming from, right? And we explain this on A Soul's Quest or on the ASQ podcast and our teachings and in our group guiding that you have to understand your core drives, right? And when you understand your core drives, you understand them. And the best analogy that I have is that you can describe it as like the engine of the vehicle, right? We're the vehicle and the engine is our core drives. So in an automobile, in a vehicle, if you don't have an engine, the car is useless, right? You can't go anywhere without an engine. Our core drives function the same way. They are a part of us. They've been there since our inception, since we were born, right? And when those core drives are covered in layers of what I call being in the matrix, societal conditioning, your family structure, etc., you start to ignore those core drives, which are seeking, belonging, curiosity, play, all of the things that make us human beings, right? And what happens is, for example, with my situation with the kids, my sense of purpose and belonging and that seeking drive were affected because I wasn't needed by them in the same capacity. So I needed to understand the emotions that I was feeling because there's the emotions, which I describe as like the dashboard of the vehicle, right? So when the dashboard of the vehicle, the check engine light comes on, right? What do we often do? We ignore it. Sometimes I'll put a little like a picture in front of it so I don't have to look at it because I don't want to deal with the problem, which is in the engine, which are the core drives. So when you're able to connect those two things together and understand where the emotion what is this emotion telling me? And how do I address that or acknowledge that so that I can address the core drive? You start to integrate and thus become more coherent as an individual, more in alignment. So for me, it was really understanding this mourning and this sadness that I'm feeling is connected to something else. And what do I do about that drive? Like how do I address that? And for me, it was really just reaching out to them, checking in on them. Hi, how are you? And understanding that I did my job as a mother. I gave them everything that they needed so they didn't have to come and ask me for things or need me for anything. And that was really the correlation. I don't know if that was a good example, but that's kind of one that I experienced that most recently, at least.
Mm-hmm.
That was a lot.
No, but it all makes sense. And when someone is standing in that uncertainty,
Mhm.
what inner dialogue truly helps them move forward rather than freeze?
It's what I just mentioned. I think what happens is we have to be able to pause, right? At a Soul's Quest, we teach a framework that we developed. It's called the PEP framework. The PEP framework is the first P is for perspective, right? A lot of the times, what happens in our situations is that the situation is right in front of us. It's immediately in front of us. And what happens is that you can't see the tree for the forest because it's right in front of your face, right? You have to be able to step back from a situation and take a different perspective. And when you take a different perspective, things start to shift and look a little bit different, right? The E in the PEP framework is experience. We take our experiences and oftentimes we ask the question of why did this happen to me? Why is this happening to me? What we need to do is we need to shift that question from why to can I what do I take out of this experience and learn to apply in a manner that is productive? And then the last P is for philosophy. So that's the PEP framework. And the philosophy is once you take that different perspective and you acknowledge your experiences and take them for what they are and learn from those experiences rather than sweeping them under the rug or not, confronting those issues, then you show up with a different philosophy of how you show up in life. Same thing with my experience with my kids, right? I was right in the middle of it. It was right in front of my face, and I couldn't see that I had done my job as a mother and that my purpose, I still had a purpose. I'm still their mother, but they don't need me in the same way because I equipped them with what they needed to function as adults, right? But I felt sadness, longing, I was mourning a loss. So I had to step back from that situation and look at it differently, and once I was able to do that, I was able to say, "Oh, you know what? I did my job. I'm doing great. This is wonderful." I think the question that needs to be asked in those situations rather than freezing is just pausing and asking, "What is going on in this situation? What am I feeling?" And acknowledge those feelings and then make sense out of them between the emotion, which again is the check engine light, right? The dashboard, and then the core drive that it's affecting. And if anybody wants to learn more about the core drives, they're happy they can reach out and we'll discuss it. But yeah. So I
Mhm.
don't know if that answers your question. I'm so long-winded, it's terrible.
Mhm. No, it absolutely does answer my question. And also, imagine your perspective here will offer listeners a language for hope, especially those who feel like the world is dissolving right now.
And what was the question? The word you mean?
Like especially those who feel their world is dissolving right now.
Oh yeah, definitely. This is a world uh, um that is shifting and evolving very quickly, right? We have all these new things like AI and we have all these things. So one of the things that we talk about, and we just talked about this in our group guiding the other night, because I had a young lady say the same thing. Everything's going like things are just falling apart and things don't feel comfortable anymore or whatever. We have to be able to look at our situations again from that PEP framework, right? Everything every situation that we encounter, we we create a narrative or as a narrative for that situation, right? And certainly I'm not trying to diminish what people are going through, people's aces, your adverse childhood experiences and whatnot, because I'm a product of that as well. But a lot of the times we jump to a conclusion so quickly about a situation and we draw a narrative that oftentimes is not realistic, right? And so I think for me, when I feel these shifts, it really is going back to what I mentioned earlier, which is taking a pause, taking a step back and understanding and trying to put different lenses on to look at the situation from a different perspective, because oftentimes we look at it from one perspective, and that perspective, a lot of the time, it's not accurate, right? Or if it is accurate, there are multiple ways to deal with that situation or that narrative, right? So I think for me, again, because I can only speak for myself, it's really just taking a moment to pause, understand that our narratives are often created by unrealistic ideals, and trying to reframe it in a way that is more productive, or that at least can be confronted in a more positive way. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes, 100%. And also, the hero's journey frames adversity as initiation. How can everyday individuals begin to recognize their challenges as part of a larger transformational arc?
That's a great question. So, my partner, Omar, who is not here right now, unfortunately for this interview, he developed the concept of having the podcast that we do. And our teachings come from the hero's journey. And if people haven't heard of the hero's journey, it's a cyclical experience that we go through in life, right? We are we believe we're pitched into a family that we don't choose, right? You get the parents that you get the family, the siblings, the scenario, the setup, the home, the family structure. We don't choose that, right? So you grow up in this family, and you grow up with this sense of with ideals that are passed on to you from your parents or your siblings or whatever the situation gives you, right? And what happens is you go through life and you start to hit certain challenges, right? And those adversities that you mentioned are what we call the call to action, or what the hero's journey calls the call to action. It's an opportunity for you to either engage in this. I don't know if you've ever heard of this book, it's called The Alchemist. Amazing book. But that's exactly what that's exactly what he was writing about his hero's journey. It's the call to the adventure, right? I can explain it in this way. I was in the corporate world for a long time, and I allowed that situation to define who I was, right? Which we often do. This is just the way that the world works, right? And so what happens is you lose connection with your essence, who you really are inside, right? And you allow the labels that are placed on you to form your identity. So when I earned my doctorate, when I got my PhD, all of a sudden, when I thought, all of my experience and then getting this degree was going to open doors for me, doors began to shut and close on me. And it closed on me abruptly. It wasn't like it was easy peasy letting me down. It was a very in your face, you're not going to be promoted. You're not going to get this. So I jumped ship and I left the corporate world, and I ended up not jumping ship to come into my own what I'm doing now. I went to another organization that it was wildly toxic. And I suffered tremendously because I was like losing my identity. I I knew there was something more for me. I cried. I was like crybaby, like fetal position crying. I wasn't eating. I was mistreating myself. Um, and I was having a lot of difficulty understanding what is going on, right? That was the call to adventure for me, because I was either going to stay in this situation that was wildly toxic and it was really affecting my health and my relationship, or I was going to jump ship and take on a soul's quest, or the ASQ empowerment services, which is what I represent in our brand. And that was huge, because that was me leaving a job that paid me very well, but I was suffering physically and mentally, right? And so I had to make a decision: jump ship into a business that is not making any money, or stay in this situation that was affecting me. That's the adversity. And so what I had to do in that moment was use the PEP framework. Look at the situation, understand it for what it was, be realistic. And that was pausing, taking a step back, understanding from my experiences that I had what it took to go into my business fully and represent it fully, and then showed up in a different way, right? More positive. Even though it felt scary, I did it. And I'm not saying it's easy for everybody. It's something that oftentimes, this is why we do group guiding, is because people have to walk through this and they have to understand it from a different perspective so that they can also answer the call to the adventure. But when you do it, you're living from your essence and it feels amazing. I feel 100% better. And I'm not making nearly what I was making in the corporate world, but I feel better as an individual because I'm living my authentic self. Does that make sense or answer your question? I hope. Okay, good.
Yes, you did. And that is amazing.
Thank you.
Also, do you think people struggle more with recognizing the call or with answering it?
That's a great question. I would say that that's a really good question. It's hard to say. I think that people oftentimes misconstrue the emotions that they're feeling. So this goes back to talking about the core drives and emotions, right? W- One of the core drives that we have is belonging, right? And belonging shows up in emotions in a variety of ways, right? It could show up as loss, it could show up as I'm not enough, it could show up as shame, it could show up as so many different things, right? So the core belonging, that core drive of belonging is there and it exists. It's in us. It's in all of us. We all want to belong, right? It's human nature. And then what happens is the emotions show up and we misread the emotions. This is a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier. So when you feel shame, when you feel left out, when you feel not accepted, or that you're overcompensating to be a part of something, a group, whatever it is, we acknowledge it. And I think oftentimes we acknowledge it with shame. And so what happens is we don't want to address it. We want to stay away from it. Right. But what happens is that's going to be a reoccurring cycle until you address it. And so it's really understanding, why do I feel the way that I do? What is this emotion trying to tell me? And then understanding which drive it's connected to. In this case, this example is the belonging drive. I was mourning and hurting and suffering, and I felt shame. I felt all these things because I was going to leave a job that was a six-figure salary to go to something that we had not 100% built full on, right? I wanted to belong. I wanted to be accepted. All these emotions were showing up and I had to pause and look at what was happening with these emotions and what they were trying to tell me. And that I think is very difficult, but what's going to happen to you if you don't address it and go on that deeper dive is it's going to continue to show up. You're going to continue to be miserable. You're going to continue to cry and suffer until you address that drive, until you address or acknowledge that this is my call to the adventure. I have to confront what is going on in front of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also your distinction between those two might open a doorway for listeners who don't yet realize they're already on their own quest.
Yes. Yes. We all are on our own quest, and I don't think that people really know that we're all on the hero's journey. Or I say heroines for the women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you both walk through identity loss and reinvention. So, what inner qualities or practices kept you anchored when everything familiar had fallen away?
Ugh, that's a great question too. You got great questions today. Um, we when we do our group guiding, the first thing that we ask individuals to do when they participate in our groups is to establish a place that they can go to. It can be any place, but a place, right? Where you can go and you can be with yourself, right? I established that for myself. I bought myself this nice little chair, and it's not meditation. This isn't anything about that. And I'm not trying to be woo woo either about it. It's literally a place that you can go to where you can be with your own self, right? Where you can be the observer of yourself. You can be with yourself and experience things, what we were just talking about, emotions and journaling. Those are the two practices that I think really grounded me in my moments of adversity. It allowed me to, the most concentrated focus that we can have is taking a pen or a pencil and putting it to paper. And when you can just write everything down unfiltered, oftentimes you can reflect on that and really start to understand your feelings because you're getting them out on paper. There were things that I wrote down that I was like, "What? I didn't even think I was really feeling this way, but I'm feeling it, so I'm writing it down and connecting with that," right? And so I think that's one way to stay grounded and anchored. It's a big thing for me. I do it every morning, um, without hesitation. Even when I have my granddaughter, I will get up early to go to that place where I can ground myself and anchor in whatever situation that I'm experiencing in the moment.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and how does someone cultivate those qualities if they feel emotionally or spiritually depleted?
I think how do they cultivate those qualities? I don't think it's a matter of cultivating the qualities. I think we all have those qualities. I think it's really just extending. Let me see. If I was talking to myself and when I have done that, I think the thing that I've done is I've extended myself grace and allowed myself to process and experience these feelings that sometimes feel really crazy. Um, and not oftentimes I'll when I'm talking with people, one of the things that they'll say is, I feel like I'm going crazy or, what's going on with me? And that's a natural response. But I think it really is a matter of it's normal to say these things, but I think it's a matter of sitting down with yourself and giving yourself the grace and the compassion that you need. Think about yourself as so we all have an inner child, right? And what we have done through life because of societal expectations, family, etc., is we have quieted or dimmed that inner child, right? If you were talking to your inner child who was experiencing these feelings, what would you say to your inner child? Would you shame them? Would you tell them to be quiet? Would you tell them not to experience things like, stop it, you're embarrassing? What would you say to your inner child? I know for me, when I talk to my inner child now, I say, it's okay. You are loved. You are appreciated. You are not shameful. You are not. I think that's the biggest recommendation that I could give to somebody in this brief time that we have together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also your answer can give our audience something tangible, something they can practice today.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. All of this is super easy to practice.
Mhm.
And I say that because I say physically it's easy to practice. Emotionally, that's where the work comes in, right? It's not easy work. This what me and Omar teach with A Soul's Quest and ASQ empowerment is not easy work because we are asking people to confront something that we are not used to confronting, and that's that inner work.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I absolutely agree. So thank you so much for sharing such grounded, soul-stirring wisdom. This conversation is a reminder that transitions aren't something we survive. They're something that reshapes us. And for everyone listening, if you're standing at the edge of an ending or the threshold of a beginning, take today as an invitation to lean inward, trust the journey, and answer the call you've been avoiding. Your next chapter is waiting for you to step into it with clarity and courage.